it's an amazing language, it's an amazing culture, it's all around. I couldn't live on Skye and not be immersed in it.
In retrospect, it was a place in which there were novelists, poets, singers, songwriters as well, accordion players, a couple of titles. There was music, there was literature, there was Gaelic culture all around.
Well, there was always music. Well, there wasn't a lot of music. There wasn't a lot of music, there was a lot of song. Mm-hmm. But there were very few instruments.
Started playing music when I was living in Shetland when I was about 20, actually. So I came to it quite late in life. I was around a lot of musicians. There are so many musicians in Shetland. It's just incredible. Shetland's got an amazing musical culture, all sorts of different music happening, rock and jazz and folk and classical and just you name it. And I really wanted to take up the accordion because actually I found sitting in the pub when everyone else was having lots of fun playing music, I really wanted to, also be playing music. And I think that was a real driving factor. And originally I wanted to take up the accordion, and someone in the pub once said, well, why don't you try this? And they just gave me this enormous piano accordion to try out. And it came up to about here, seriously, like right above my head. And I tried playing. It was just really heavy and difficult. And I was like, I couldn't even make a note with it. And I just thought, yeah, that's not going to happen. And then I discovered the concertina. I think I was away one summer down in Brighton, and I went to a Hobgoblin, which is a folk music shop, and found these little squeeze boxes that are kind of this size. In fact, I've got mine right here, concertina. And I just picked it up, and I was just like, yes, this is my instrument.
Oh yeah, the songs. There was always songs because when people gathered together, they would exchange songs, and they would exchange new songs. New songs are being written about things that happened. My singing, my function is to share information. Mm-hmm. So I tend to come away from what sounds beautiful and mm-hmm. what is in praise, which doesn't have a story. Mm-hmm. I generally don't use it as a tool for informing others about our way of life and culture.
I don't have any formal mentoring, so it's probably easiest to say that I'm an autodidact in terms of poetry. They did some at school, and none of my teachers were writers themselves, so they taught me how to criticize rather than how to create. I was slightly unfortunate. My older brother, who's 2 years older, when he went to secondary school, he was taught by one of the best Gaelic novelists and poets. But by the time I'd got there, he'd moved on to a different school. So I just missed out on that. And it means that you learn from what's around you rather than from any formal kind of method. So I've got a poem of my own in which I say, there are only so many poems you can write about birds, death, and the seas. Because you end up going, I'm from an island, so you write about the sea. You write about the liminal space between land and sea, the mutability, how everything is constantly changing, everything's constantly in flux. And also, if you're writing, especially in Gaelic, you're constantly, the background hum is this a poem about Gaelic? Is this a metaphor for the decline of the language, or for the rejuvenation of the language? And so there's always that risk. And so I try and do as many different things as possible.
There are loads, thousands about the landscape and the sense of longing, and especially a lot of them written by people who moved away, whether they were sailors or otherwise. So that's a very common theme. But I try and do the other stuff. What's about things that happened and the lifestyle.
I mean, I think there's this, and I've come across this in all the research that I've done, all the field work, both in Scotland and also over in Canada. I think it's this sense of loss, people feeling like they're losing something.
I speak both. I live in both languages, so it's natural. It would be unnatural to me only to write in Gaelic, just as it would be unnatural to only write in English. My formal schooling in Gaelic finished when I was 14. I'm educated at PhD level in English, so there's different levels of fluency, different types of fluency, but it depends what I want to do with the languages. So I have taught Gaelic in the past, and I um, have done mentoring courses in Gaelic creative writing and Gaelic criticism and various things like this. Um, there are other people that can teach Gaelic, and there are people who can teach the grammar of it, the construction of language better than I can. I see more or less my role within the languages to mess around in the margins of it, the edges of it, to see how where it can be pushed. Because that's what literature is pushing, and especially poetry is pushing a language to its edges and seeing what happens, seeing what's out there, seeing what can be experimented or created. And part of that is telling different stories in or about Gaelic.
I both teach people how to, teach people the language, but I also teach people all the culture around it and aspects of who we are and the way of life. And that's why it's very difficult now, because that way of life is gone. I always used to say this is who we are, but things have changed drastically in the last 15 years, and now it's kind of pulled the rug from under me, because there's very, very few, if any, vestiges of that kind of life, As you said, a time of change, and I don't know where it's going. The language is changing. We have a lot of learners. We have a lot of people who are not based in the culture. So that makes interpretation quite difficult as well. You have to do it differently and break it right down and approach it from a zero knowledge. Whereas before, where you used to be, there was commonalities and shared experience, shared life experience.
Being able to speak Gaelic is a big bonus. I think, Gaelic people appreciate that you make the effort to, even if it's just a few words. I think it's always a good idea to learn the language, for sure. But it's a big investment. It takes a long, long time. It's taken me years and years to kind of, get to the point where I can just chit chat away to people. But it does make a big difference. These are traditions that are under threat. 50 years ago, there were a lot more people singing this music. There were a lot more people going to church and taking part. There were a lot more Gaelic speakers. So there's this kind of, I think there's always this theme. It was the same in the northeast of Scotland, that these traditions are under threat, and there's less happening today than there used to be. And to an extent that's true, but there have also, as we know, there have been a lot of revivals of interest in all sorts of different aspects of traditional culture.
But the Lewis I left is not the Lewis that exists. And so if I was to move back to Lewis now, it would be not slotting back into a life or a culture. It would be fighting to create a space. My mother's from Skye, so half my family's from Skye, and Skye is the one where you see the impact of tourism and inward migration more than any of the other islands, because it's got a bridge, because it's beautiful, because it's famous, because it has been ranked as one of the top 10 islands in the world, and so on and so on. But it means that the population change in the Isle of Skye has been faster than anywhere else. And you can see the absolute thinning out of Gaelic culture in some ways. Um, and so Skye would be a difficult place to go and live in, as with Lewis. It's part of the question of how much you become an attraction for other people's versions of a lifestyle rather than living as part of an organic community that doesn't have to question itself on an ongoing basis. And so it's only in Lewis and then luckily Skye where you had, say, council wards where more than 50% of the people spoke. So it was still a daily language. And it still is, so that's absolutely under threat. And there's been a lot of research that's been done recently into what they call the vernacular crisis, how as a community language it is disappearing.
it's to do with the dwindling numbers of in 2011 there was only 58,000 speakers of Gaelic in Scotland. That's only 1% of the population of Scotland. In 2010 there was a really there was a report called Gaelic Crisis in the Vernacular Community, and they said that Gaelic would no longer be a community language in the Hebrides by 2030. So we're 5 years. We've lost 5 years, and not a lot of effort has been done by the agencies that have responsibility for language development. They totally tried to bury the report and don't have dialogue with anybody about it. So that's where we are. Probably outside influences, not just from the people moving here. That kind of led to breakdown of community, definitely. But as regards the language, it's probably about a lot of people saying, well, it's too late, why am I going to try? Because we can't turn the tide. That's what's diminished the use of the language and the strength that was in it. And it's about people giving up. But, I'm dogged, I'm determined. I do storytelling originals are in Gaelic, but I've had to change them into English because of the thirst for knowledge from other people, which changes it quite a bit. But I never go to a dictionary. That probably makes me different to other people. But you can't dig down if you don't have that lived experience. Because that's why there's a lot of people moving in and they're disregarding the traditions because they don't understand, because they don't have the same baseline as us. And they're more to be pitied than to be scolded. But it doesn't change the erosion of the culture.
Actually, when I started exploring the sacred song traditions in the islands, I found that that's actually, there's so much to Gaelic psalm singing, but there's actually all these other traditions alongside Gaelic psalm singing that are equally interesting and rich. So you've got the spiritual song tradition, a lot of the bardic tradition, which is still strong in the Hebrides, of people writing personal songs that reflect their beliefs and the world around them. And then in the Catholic tradition in South Uist and Eriskay and Barra, you've got the very rich hymn writing tradition as well, which is totally different. It's a totally different tradition, in that that belongs to the Catholic Church, and these are hymns that people sing in the church. So it just completely sort of opened up this whole new world. For me, I think living in the Highlands, and, I felt very privileged to have had that opportunity to meet so many amazing people, really inspiring people, hear their stories, hear about the difference, just become, I suppose, being able to step into different areas of the community that I wouldn't necessarily in my daily life have access to or be part of. So I think it's really easy to have preconceptions about what I don't know, church life is like, or what's different kinds of communities are like, different islands are like. And I think until you go there and meet people and start making connections and talking to people and hearing people's stories, then you've only got a very small part of the picture. So that to me has been really amazing, and I feel like I know the West Coast so much better.
There's a rawness and a uniqueness, and same as pipe music. You can tell who is a native Gaelic speaker by the way they play the pipes. You can tell the language comes through the music, and the same for not just melodian but accordion players. You can hear that as well. And I know it's there, and we're losing it. And not only just that they are language, a native language speaker, Gaelic language speaker, but what area they're from and the dialect. You can hear that in the music. we recognise people in relation to where they are in the landscape and who they are and where their people came from, and that's very much pinned in a place in our minds. That's why the people who move into the island, we can't pin them in a landscape because we don't know where they belong. So it's quite difficult to sometimes, to remember them. But we have a network of, we know who the island families are and where they were based, where they lived, where they came from, where they were cleared from, where they went, where their sons and daughters went. And that's the network of the global positioning of families, of people.
Irish trade meant a lot to me because it was, I was brought up in Irish trade. My dad was a weaver, and a lot of our younger days were spent in the loom shed trying to help my dad, because it was his main source of income.
Another weaver taught me, basically. So there was a training course being run in Harris at the time. It had started with a training course for the double width looms, so the modern Boris Griffiths ones, because they were looking for new weavers. And then there was a push to actually get the older single width Hattersley looms for those skills to be kept going, basically, because there's almost like a kind of generational gap in the islands of people weaving on them because of the way the industry had been, kind of fluctuating and everything, and had dropped, and so people weren't learning, especially on the older looms. So there was a big push to kind of get younger people, I was classed as younger then, into weaving. So a community group in Harris sourced the looms, got a weaver who was willing to kind of teach us all, and then that's how we started. And we were able to then rent the looms from the group initially to see if it was something you were going to be able to carry on with, whether it was something you'd be able to make a business with, and then if you were able to do that and kind of prove that you were using them and doing things with them, you were given the opportunity then to buy the looms, which is what I did. So yeah, that's how I learned.
I haven't taught anybody directly. I'm trying to encourage and sing the praises of being a weaver. Certainly if you want to stay at home on the island, it helps you to do that.
My youngest nephew is obsessed with weaving and wants to learn to weave, but his legs are about that long. So from about the age of 3, he's been sitting on my knee while I've been weaving and things. So he definitely wants to learn. And others, absolutely. The problem that we have at the moment for all weavers is that in order to then be teaching somebody else, you'd have to give up your weaving time, which, depending on where you're at in your business and everything else, can be quite hard. But absolutely, I think it's important for these skills to be passed on, at some point.
Well, I don't know about other people, but I certainly enjoyed it, and I've been at it for over 50 years.
I mean, it certainly feels just a part of my heritage. I mean, I'm aware when I'm weaving. Sometimes, you're thinking about things, that this is what my granny, would have been doing. And, I mean, maybe not always on a Hattersley, but, even on the wooden looms, when she was doing that, my great-grandparents would have been doing it, the kind of history that there is. Well, it's a tool. It's a tool to do the work, and I'm very aware that I have it a lot easier than the likes of my grandparents and great-grandparents did when they were weaving on the older style wooden looms, where they were having to be far more physically involved, in making the cloth. I'm also aware that I have it slightly, harder's the wrong word, I am more involved in creating the cloth than on the modern looms. I'm far more a part of what happens. But it's a tool to create the cloth. I think initially the commercialisation of Harris tweed is obviously good in terms of keeping a business going, and we are all reliant on that brand name. So you need to have a certain level, because otherwise who's going to know about the cloth and who's going to want the cloth? And if nobody wants the cloth, we have no work. So, you do need a level of that. In terms of the forgeries and things, I mean, it's funny sometimes when you see what gets passed off, because it clearly isn't. But at the same time, we're lucky because the Harris Tweed Authority are the ones who go after all of that. So I don't have to. If I see anything, I can just report it, pass it along, and then they go in and do all the legal side of things and deal with all of that. But I mean, I think like that, you would never, I mean, it could never actually be overly commercialised because of where we are and how it's made. You know, it has to be hand woven. So you can never just churn out hundreds and hundreds of meters a day on these looms because physically you can't do it. So to an extent we're limited in one way, but that's good because that's what then keeps it and gives it the provenance and the uniqueness, you know, which is then important as well as a selling point. We used to, through Kjol, so like Gaelic music, so we would learn Gaelic songs, different kinds of songs for different things. We also have like the mod, so it's like a Gaelic festival, so you have local mods and a national mod, so that's then, you know, obviously covering the whole of Scotland. Local mod was just Harris that we'd have, so there'd be various parts of competition, so you'd have, you know, solo singing, choir singing, telling of bar stuff, so poems, stories, things like that. So you would learn different songs for those kind of things, but we also did a project on Harris Tweed when I was in school. We went to visit a weaver, so then we learned about the dyeing, the creation of the yarn, and then obviously the finishing of cloth, the walking and everything like that. So yeah, we learned songs through that, and then you just, I don't know, you read them or you hear about them or you hear them from somewhere, and yeah, you just learn that way.
No, that I've enjoyed every minute, every bit of being a weaver and my involvement with the industry over many years. And I've met a lot of lovely people along the way.
I don't know, I think it's very different, I think, when you're from here and you have grown up with Harris Tweed, because it's just a part of life. Everything about it, you know, whether it's people who have been weaving, people who are working in the mills and things like that, it's like crofting or fishing, or it's just a part of life. And I think sometimes it's only when you see it through other people's eyes that you realise how special and important it is. And in a similar way, in a completely different vein, but the patronymics that you get, you know, the slunnig of how you name people, so you're named for who you belong to. There was a man that came to the islands in the 60s, and he realised that kind of was going to be lost, how special it was, and he started recording it and creating family trees and linking families all over the islands together. And he's now done croft histories and that for basically from Lewis right down to Barra. But it was somebody with outside eyes seeing that and seeing how important it is, that you when you look at it then through their eyes, you realise it. And I think sometimes we're probably a bit guilty of just being like, okay, Harris Tweed, it's just there. But now that I'm getting older, and as there are fewer and fewer weavers, I'm now realising, I think, more the importance of it and the connections that we have to other people through it. And not just, you know, familial connections like I have, you know, and stories I've heard of people before me through the industry and that in my own family, but the connections that we have with other people throughout the islands, just because we're all weavers, you know, or because we work in this industry. And I think that's really important.
I did, yeah. I was born and brought up in Ness, so up in North Lewis. So actually my village is listed there from Yorkie. So I'm like right on the tip of the island. Yeah, I've been living there for like 21 years. But I think growing up here, I've got a lot of sense and pride with the culture and heritage, but I think there's also a sense of independency as well, because you live so far away from the main town of Stornoway that you have to be independent to get to and from places. But also living in such a close-knit community and in a safe environment, you would just go into whoever's house and you just walk in and talk to whoever. So I suppose that sociable aspect as well has contributed to the way that I am.
I would come here on my holidays, and I've got lots of cousins here, so I've got a lot of family connections on the islands, particularly up in the north. I moved here in 2015. I was living in Asia with my family, and but a few years before that, my husband and I were like, oh, well, we should probably buy a house in the UK. So we bought the house off my aunt, and it was just sitting there for 3 years, a holiday home for my family, whoever wanted to come up. And then when we decided we were going to move back to the UK, it seemed like the right thing to do is to move back to the house that we bought.
No, I knew from a very young age that I didn't want to leave the island. So I left school in 2021, started college here, but that didn't work out. Then went into a job, was there for about a year, then got a summer placement here in May 2022, and I've been here ever since. Well, I think ever since working at Galston Estate that I've really gotten an understanding of the land and community ownership, because I mean 56,000 acres of North Lewis is in community ownership, which I never knew when I was younger, because it's not something that they teach about in school. So I feel I've learned about it a lot more, and I suppose in a way that has made that connection stronger. And as I've gotten older, I've sort of been pushed into the deep end into crofting. My dad bought sheep back in 2021, so I help him out with, I think about 25 sheep and like 30 odd lambs. So our flock has extended drastically because we started at 12. So I think that as well, just working with the livestock and peat culture, not that I do it personally, but I know that my family does. So that too.
I feel that there's something in you that does tie you to the island if you've got connections here. I don't really know how to describe what it is, but I mean, I've got very fond memories of coming up here on holiday. The freedom that we had as kids compared to what we had back home in the city, and just that kind of longing to be here. I've certainly gained a much better understanding of it since working for the Trust. I've started working for the Trust in 2019. But it's a large area, most of which is moorland, and I don't think as a trust we spend enough time out on the land. We spend a lot of time sat here in the office.
We're definitely an ageing population, so all the people when I was younger that were so into crofting have either passed or they just can't able to do it anymore, and because there's loads of young people moving away, there's not really that, like, information isn't getting passed down, so I think there's that as a barrier as well. So I think it's changed in that aspect, although there is still a strong crofting community, but I think that has changed. And with people moving up, they have taken to the practice as well, which is really good. And again, that still creates the community because we're all helping each other out. Because sometimes we have a summer, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have a winter. Well, we always have a winter, I say. We always have a winter. So I think, I think you just naturally adapt because we're so used to the weather changing all the time that you sort of just get on with it. So like this lambing, it was beautiful weather. It was great. It was fantastic, and it meant that we didn't have to put the lambs into the barn. They could be put out straight away because it was nice and warm. But last year it was so wet and horrible that you have to put all the lambs into the barn or else they won't survive. So I think it's like adapting at the time of what gets thrown at you.
I would say even in the 10 years that I've lived here, it's changed culturally as well. In terms of the landscape, I know that the cliffs are eroding and things, but it's very difficult. And in this part of Ness, there's sand dunes, and every year they're changing. You can see them changing. So that sort of physical side, there is changes to the landscape, but culturally, I think it's changed a lot. A lot more people have moved into the areas, particularly through COVID. So I think the culture has kind of diluted a little bit. That's probably down to social media as well.
Have you seen the eye of the butt? It's basically like a massive hole in stone. That's the bottom of Lewis. And I was told that that was made not because of coastal erosion, but because the Vikings tried to pull us all the way back to Norway. So, and I believed it. Of course I did. I was a child, and I genuinely believed that the Vikings tried to pull us, and that's why there's the like the hole, the circle in the rock.
There's a lot of people that were coming on holiday here, particularly when we couldn't go abroad, and they weren't as respectful to the land as they could have been. And I think they were just not educated in the best practice. They were the ones that would maybe just have their annual holiday in Spain or wherever. So this was completely new to them to come somewhere like this. I think for the majority, though, the people that do come, sort of now that COVID's kind of in our memories, the majority that come are really quite respectful. We've got a campsite out the back, and the aim of us putting the campsite in was to try and encourage people off the sort of fragile land, the muckers, moorland, and into a campsite, as well as bring money in to the community. You know, quite often the locals are just as destructive. The young people out in quad bikes doing donuts and things like that. There is an impact, but I think that there's been a lot of education around responsible camping, and I don't feel that it is as much of an issue as what it has been in the past. I think most people are pretty respectful. But what we do get now is just that this year and last is a lot more impact from cruise ship tourism. So there's big ships coming in that we've never seen before, and I think that's having a bit of an impact.
I think people like who are born and brought up just like naturally have a connection to the environment. I think that land is integrated into our culture and heritage, with like peat cutting and crofting, and I think that's what makes us as like Highlanders, and having that unique culture and heritage. So just having that pride and sharing it with other people, I think it's vital and it's very important, because it's the fear of having it diluted. So it's to keep it going and to teach other people, and to make people aware. And I suppose we're doing that through tourism as well. With the cruise ships coming in, North Lewis are offering excursions and teaching the tourists about our culture and heritage, which I think is vital.
It's cliche, but it's home. I couldn't imagine living or growing up anywhere else. I finished school in Stornoway. I didn't want to go to university or college. I went and I lived in the Netherlands for about 6 months, just to see what life was like off the island. But I only did about 6 months, and I got homesick. So I came back, and since then just been working on the island.
My family can be traced back over 500 years. I'm 18th generation, so I think for example, my village, every rock that's been placed down, every piece of pottery that's washed up on the shore, every person in the graveyard that looks across is my descendant. It's been put there by them. It's been done by them. And every mark on the landscape was done by them, and so I feel very connected to it in that way. I think it's really special, especially with how much hardship our people have gone through the clearances and the famine. I feel very blessed and grateful to come from such a strong, resilient community.
Anyone that asks where I'm from and where home is, it's Haddis. It's always been Haddis, and it always will be Haddis. I'll never be from anywhere else. I love Glasgow, and I would move back to Glasgow, but it would never be where I'm from. Or, if anyone asked me, I would never say I was from anywhere else but Haddis. Growing up, it was just normal, and this just was my childhood and I didn't really see it as anything special or different. But having the opportunity to move away for uni, I think put it into perspective of how different my upbringing maybe was to other people, and things that were different, maybe things that we felt and experienced about where we came from is not the same with other people that I was speaking to. They didn't feel the same connection to, you know, their home or passion or I guess fear as well.
I moved to the Middle East. I moved to Oman. My dad was in the army before he had me, and during the Kuwait War, in the Gulf War, the Sultan of Oman let British soldiers take refuge in Oman, and he had actually been educated in St Andrews, funny enough, and loved the bagpipes, loved everything Scottish. So he said to Gordon, who was my dad's friend, who is a piper and was a piper in the army, he wrote it's a very famous song, Sands of Kuwait, and he said to Gordon, how much do I have to pay you for you to leave the army and live here and teach my men how to play the bagpipes? And Gordon never left and continues, he still does that, he still teaches men how to play the bagpipes in Oman. There's a whole group of men on camels in Oman in full distashes with which is the traditional Omani dress, and they all play bagpipes perfectly. It's lovely. But he also started up another business, like a tourism business, and he said to my dad, look, I need somebody who can drive boats. Will you come out and will you do it? And we said, yeah. I feel very, very fortunate to have multiple places that I call home.
In 2020, I went to Glasgow Uni. That was always my plan to go to Glasgow. A lot of islanders traditionally went to Glasgow. That was where, if they were going away, that's where they went. There's a big island community within Glasgow, so it kind of felt like a home away from home. Even though it was COVID, I knew that Glasgow was where I wanted to go. And it turned out that actually a girl from Harris also came along with me. So there was the two of us in Glasgow, and yeah, I loved Glasgow and I do miss the city. But I think I lived with her for the 4 years, and I think living with her, and she was studying Gaelic, so it kept me very much connected to, you know, my island home, and I didn't feel too much homesickness.
My mum and dad are very proud of being from here. My mother was raised in the RAF, so she was moved around a lot as a wee girl. And my dad was raised in the ministry, so his father was a minister. And I think combined, the two of them were enrolled in 25 different schools. Like if you combine all the primary and secondary. So they really, really, really wanted to make sure that I always knew where was home, because for them, home was something that wasn't really tangible for them. They knew that they were from here. They knew that they had this long history, and when they would come back, there'd be cousins and everything and whatever. But nowhere really felt like home for them, because they had home in so many different places. So I was very lucky that they really drilled that into me, that this is your home, these are your people. Your people fought so hard to stay here when so many people were killed, were burnt out of their houses, were forced to leave, and our people, you know, held on by the skin of their teeth really to this place.
I was part of the Gaelic Society in Glasgow, which is actually the second oldest society at the university. And there's a big island community there, and it felt very much that I was still connected to that culture and heritage. A lot of the people in that society are from the mainland, but they have parents that are islanders, and they understand, I guess, what it's like. And it was very nice to be with people that understood kind of where you came from, and, you know, odd things and like cultural references to in Gaelic and things like that, it just felt like I had a home away from home.
I went through Gaelic medium education, and then when I was 10, the recession was happening, and my parents became in a very difficult economic situation, which meant that we were going to lose our house. and randomly an email came through from my dad's friend who was working abroad, and it was something my parents never would have done, but it was through desperation of we need to make sure that my dad, because you're not just selling a house. When you're selling a house here, you're selling the croft, and the croft is passed down generationally, and the crofts were given to the men after they came back from the war, and my dad would have done anything not to have let that happen. So we left, and at that time it was believed that for me to be fluent, now I could speak English pretty much perfectly, but as perfectly as a 10-year-old could, but my literacy was pretty much non-existent. So they advised my parents that I would go into an English as a second language class, and that all communication in Gaelic had to stop. So when I was speaking to my grandma, which was really strange because when you form a relationship with somebody in a language and then you switch, it's horrible actually to, and I really didn't like it, and I was already missing my grandparents, so to have to be speaking to them in another language, it was like I was speaking to a different person, because you are a different person. Every language you speak in, you're slightly different. Obviously your soul is the same, but you are a slightly different person, and yeah, it was very confusing for me at that time. But anyway, it happened. And when I came back, my school had shrunk in size, and it meant that the Gaelic medium no longer existed. It was only English medium. So I then continued on in English, and when I was 12, when I had to go into secondary education, a review was done on my Gaelic to see if I would go back into Gaelic medium education, which was an option in the Nicholson, or if I would go into English. And I missed by like 5 points for what I could have gotten in, so into English. But Gaelic was always super easy for me, and I took it all the way through to advanced higher, which was great. And then I did it for a year in Solmore, which meant that I pretty much regained complete fluency, because in Solmore you sign a contract that you only speak Gaelic. Even if an electrician comes through the door, you have to say to them, you have to continue until they say to you, sorry, I don't speak Gaelic. That's when you can go, okay, and then you can change with it. But then I moved again, and I moved out of the country again, and it meant that it became more difficult for me. So yeah, now I'm here and I'm in this. That's why it's a very convoluted, complicated story. But yeah, if someone's speaking it, I have no problem understanding it. But when I come to speaking it, I don't know, I find it sometimes embarrassing that I can't respond the way that I know I want to. So sometimes that holds me back, but that's a rubbish excuse for somebody that should be trying better and trying harder. So yeah.
So when I went into primary school, you can either go into the English side of it or the Gaelic side. And I was put into the Gaelic side. So you get your 7 years in primary school, and then I did my first and second year of secondary school in the local school when it was still open for the secondary. So 9 years of Gaelic, plus speaking it at home anyway. So
I'm not the most confident speaker, but that's kind of my problem and my fault, I guess, because I just don't speak it as much as I should. But it's something I didn't learn in school. I learned at home. The school I went to was the last village school in Harris, and there were 6 of us when it's closed in 2013, and they didn't have like a Gaelic. If there were 6 of us, you can't have a Gaelic in an English class. So it was very much just Gaelic was part of your everyday teaching, because our teachers all had Gaelic. And I think they made a conscious decision to push Gaelic a lot in our school, so we were still doing the same work that the Gaelic medium schools were doing, because our head teacher was head of both a Gaelic school and our wee school. So it was something that I did do in school, but not until I got to secondary school I was put in with the native speakers, because my Gaelic was better than a learner, and then that's when my Gaelic kind of became more, I guess, fluent.
I enjoy that no matter what event you would go to, any sort of community event, it would be, you'd see folk there who are like 5 years old, and folk who are 85. It wouldn't really matter what you went to, there'd always be a good mix of everyone.
I just became totally immersed in the community. Uig's very small, it's only 250 people, and we have a small shop, and we have a small cafe, and a small museum, and community centre, and dances, and I became so in love with my community again, which I think I'd never truly appreciated growing up, how special it was. And things like my cousins and my granny and my aunties that love me so much, and I love them so much. But I was missing out on, I think, the richest thing that somebody can have in their life, and that's having their family around them. And not for all this sun and tapas in Spain would I go back to leave my family again.
We're so much more connected to our past than maybe other people are. You know, people don't care as much where they come from. It's just like, oh, I'm from Ayr, or I'm from Glasgow, or I'm from Edinburgh. But they don't, I guess, know their past as much as we do, whereas our past is very much part of our present. You know?
In the future, if I had kids, I can't think of anywhere that I'd feel more comfortable for them to grow up. Like, you don't have to worry about telling them, you know, don't walk through that part of town at night or something. Make sure you're back home for this time. There's no reason to be worried.
I was set on staying in Glasgow, and to be honest, up until a few weeks ago, that was still the plan. I was ready I was looking for jobs. All my jobs I was applying for were back on the mainland, mainly Glasgow or Edinburgh, because I felt that there wasn't the opportunity for me here, employment-wise and career-wise. And in a way, I still kind of feel that, but recently I'm hopeful that I might have got a job here, and it is here. And I think that opened my eyes to the fact that actually I do kind of want to stay, if I can get like a good job and a job that uses my degree, which is politics and business, which there's not that many jobs here unless, you know, you do teaching and then you've got the teaching job. But I was set on going back to Glasgow, at least for a few years, I think. But I think I always knew that eventually I would want to move back, and I think long term I still would love to live here.